coming for a very exclusive little gathering for Sharyn Show. And we are thrilled as a gallery, Winsor and Birch, to have Sharyn's exhibition with us for the first time showing here in Marlborough. And well, Sharyn is a landscape-based artist, and materiality and mark making come to the fore, I think, through the work. I think they're sort of poetic, I find sort of poetic explorations, and they reward contemplation and time. And I think actually now being here, it's very nice because we've got a moment just to sit here while we talk through the work and kind of absorb them. It's actually much like sort of going into nature and just being still in the place that begins to wash over you. And I think you get that with Sharyn's work. So while we have a little conversation, we can absorb these quiet, subtle pieces, and they begin to take on a life of their own as well, the more you're with them. But before we sort of get into our conversation, I was just going to give a bit of background to Sharyn's career and go through what you've, well, to date, where we've been and gone. So Sharyn, also Australian, born in Melbourne, for those who don't know, and received her Bachelor of Visual Communication from RMIT in Melbourne, and a further Bachelor of Fine Arts from the Hong Kong School of Art and a Master of Arts at the Royal College of Art in London. Sharyn was made a Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts in London when she launched the first carbon-neutral food and drinks product in the UK, which I don't know too much about, I'm intrigued. She's been awarded the Freedom of the City of London and is a liveryman of the Worshipful Company of Tin Plate Workers. She was a finalist in the Hong Kong Human Rights Art Prize and was named by the Observer newspaper as one of the Future 500 Rising Stars. She exhibited her work in London, Hong Kong and Australia, and for the first time now with us in Marlborough. So Sharyn and I can have a little conversation just about the work and the process. And the title of the exhibition is called Material Drawing. And I suppose essentially, we're starting from the beginning. How does that title reflect your practice?
I think it's everything, actually. I think materiality is my fascination. And so I think I'm always looking for ways in which to express myself, but through the materials. And it's a real interrogation of materials. And the drawing is the space at which sort of the inspiration and the materials sort of land together. So that's the holding space for the work.
Yeah. And one of the things which I think always interests me as an artist, called a process and routine, and how these begin to evolve and take shape in your work. So if you just talk a little bit about your practice.
So my day normally begins with a walk on Wimbledon Common or Richmond Park, and I take my dog. And it's a process of sort of absorbing the landscape, thinking and looking at the atmosphere, about memory, about sort of small fragments of moments. And usually what happens is I take those with me through and into the studio space. So I'll arrive to my studio, I'll make a coffee, I'll sit and read, I'll think about what I've seen and what I've done. And then it's about bringing all of that inspiration and unfolding it into the space. It might not necessarily start with the work. I might not start drawing. I might just be sort of just thinking about things. And then a new drawing will usually arrive with sort of a rupturous moment, a sort of a moment where I think, oh my goodness, I've got to start. And there's a blank piece of paper on the wall. But often too, the drawings, I'll sort of sit there for a while and I'll come back to the drawings. So I'll rework the drawings over and over months. They might just sit there waiting for me to be inspired, and then it'll be sort of jumping in and making further marks.
So will you be working on several pieces at once, or are you kind of flitting between different sheets of paper and materials?
Absolutely. So sometimes, I mean, the drawings are so big, I'll sort of be pulling them off the wall and working on them wet on the floor with a mop, or, you know, sort of my whole body in the space. And then that needs to dry, so I'll put that back up on the wall, let that dry, and then there'll be some other pieces that I sort of think, okay, now I'm in the mode of kind of making a really big mess. I'll now get stuck into something else and sort of keep working up the layers on another piece. So yes, if you come to my studio, there's multiple pieces all of the time in play. Yeah.
I love the fact that you said you use a mop. And obviously, apart from, we'll talk a bit about the materials you do use, and also because apart from the conventional materials, there is quite a sort of, you know, I think you're open to incorporating all sorts of elements in your work. And yeah, so just talk us through a bit about that.
A mop. So I mean, almost sort of action painting kind of. You know, there's that.
I say it feels like there's always a quite performative process to your work.
Yes.
It's not. It's actually rather being sort of constrained sitting at a desk precisely, that's not, I think you're completely opposite of that, and you'd like to be out and working and gestural and big movements in your work.
Yeah, absolutely. And the drawings are a record of that. So the drawings are literally a movement across the page, or a handprint with the dust, or as
there's
you
a
say,
great handprint, by the way, just behind you on that word there. So we have to look at that later, but you can just catch this Sharon's hand there.
Yeah, and it's sort of a signature, and it sort of locates me in the work. And often people want to know about the performative aspect of it and ask me if I record that. And actually, I'm not that interested in recording that part of it. What I'm interested in is the drawing, which is actually the record of the movement and of the time and the space.
Yeah. And so the journey to becoming sort of where you are now, because I suppose you started off with talking about your introduction that you had, it wasn't straight from art college, and then as an artist you had various sort of careers and paths before that. If you just touched on some of those, and did that I suppose that path kind of lead you on this trajectory? Did you have to go through that process to end up where you are now? Was art always calling you, knocking on your door to then become a full artist, or how did that kind of, how do you end up where you are now today?
Yeah. It was always calling me. I was always drawing as a child. That was the thing that I always did. So if someone wanted to entertain me for an hour or two, they'd give me paper and pens and I'd draw.
Yeah.
But my father, I think like most fathers, said, go and get a proper degree before you actually go and do all that arty-farty stuff. So I don't know if it really qualified, but I went and did a proper degree in visual communication. Yeah. So it gave me that practical application to then work as an art director in advertising. And that was, again, a lot of drawing in those days. So we were constantly drawing ideas and things that we'd present to the client. But it also taught me about deadlines, about budgets, and about managing a creative process through from a really big idea through to the end product. So I did that. I then set up a tea company, and it was organic, it was loose leaf, and it was carbon neutral, which was the first carbon neutral food and drink product in the UK. And I ran that for about 15 years and supplied Harvey Nichols, Harrods, John Lewis, those sorts of companies. And then ended up going to Hong Kong for 4 years, and that's where I went back and did a fine art degree. So finally I was back doing what I really wanted to do in the beginning, and went to the Royal College after I got back to London, applied and did my master's there. So that was an amazing sort of full circle to come back and think, okay, now I'm going to be a practicing artist, and I'm so thankful that I can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now you've, I suppose, reached this point, and what's the kind of the drive, the unifying theme of your work, and as you approach it, what's the kind of, what drives you to create the work?
I think it's about locating my body in landscape, and actually sort of marking out a territory and a space for all of us to reconnect to nature, because I think it's actually really important. I think in this day and age we're losing touch with the natural world, and when environment is in crisis, actually it's so important to remind ourselves how important it is to go for an early morning walk with the dogs and see the mist, and to observe nature changing over time. And when we look at things through a digital lens, it's just not the same. We don't have that same relationship that we used to have. So I think it's a really important thing to think about our fragile ecology, and realize that we're all part of nature, and whatever we do to it, we're doing to ourselves.
I think in today's age, it's a very interesting sort of concept that in a way we are more aware than ever of environmental issues and its fragility, but at the same time, actually, we are more removed from environment probably than any of our ancestors before us who were living in and amongst the landscape. And as modern life develops, we're in a way sheltering more and more into our modern worlds and digital age, at the same time as being aware of this sort of the importance of the environment and what state it's in. So I suppose it's a sense of, for you, is it in a way you're compelled to kind of connect us back to nature and the landscape, and kind of, because we're kind of aware of it, but I think when you're looking at the work, it does evoke the sense of being elemental and back in the landscape and aware of stepping outside of our modern comforts and reconnecting.
I think so. Reconnecting with these emotional states and these energetics. So it's not necessarily landscapes of paintings of landscapes past. It's not those traditional landscape
Yeah.
paintings, but there's this very evocative sense of, moving, opening up of a space and then moving into this space. So whether the landscapes are real or imagined, it's creating that effect. That is what I'm after.
And and I think landscape, obviously it's something which has always been touched on by artists across the era, but they all have their relevance to each age, and I think particularly now when you look at this work, that connection is such an important point, I think, in your work. But also interesting about different artists, and I was wondering, when you look at your work, what are there other artists sort of historically who feed into, or you're aware of perhaps in the background?
Yeah, definitely. These liminal spaces of the nocturnes of Whistler, where there's just that sort of evocative, you can't quite tell what's going on in the semi-darkness. Turner's beautiful, misty sort of environmental paintings. Cy Twombly's mark making and sort of expressive process. Tacita Dean's sort of relationship to deep time. So yes, definitely, there's lots of past masters I'm linking to, and current masters.
Yeah, and away from sort of the charcoal drawing, which we're chiefly focused on, but there is this, again, the materiality and using the slate, which is not a conventional surface on which to use. Is for medium wise, because I know you like to work beyond with ceramics and sculpture as well. So how does that fit into your practice, and what else do you do apart from the drawings?
Yeah, so definitely sculpture, installation, and I love finding materials. So I mean, these were found roof slates, but when I started to look at them and I was looking for something to work with on a black ground, all of a sudden the landscapes were almost there. I just had to sort of reveal them. So there was a sort of energetics inside it, and I think whatever material I'm ever working on, it's looking at that energetic, sort of revealing that energetics inside the material. That's the key thing for me. Sort of really interrogating, what does this material do, and how will it respond, or how will it react, and then how will I react to it. So
And is ceramics a part of your practice as well?
Yes, that was my major at the Royal College of Art. But again, I think it was really, I sort of snuck in there on the side door. It was more about materiality. So how does ceramics work? How do they respond to absorbing different materials? How do they respond at different heats? How do they respond when you put inclusions inside them? So it was ceramics, but materiality was the driver.